There's a sound soldiers never forget. It is not the roar of the engines or the crack of a rifle. It is the heartbeat that echoes inside the helmet, right before the first shot is fired. That moment between silence and chaos, where everything slows down and every breath could be your last. Afghanistan began like that, with silence, and the sound of hearts preparing for a war that would last 2 decades. It was September 2001. The world stood still as towers fell and smoke filled the skies over New York. And from that smoke, a mission was born. Not for conquest, not for power, but to hunt down those who had struck at America's heart. Thousands of young men and women stepped forward, raising their hands to swear an oath. They left behind comfort, certainty, and home. Stepping into the unknown mountains of Afghanistan, they arrived to a land of extremes, blistering heat by day, freezing nights by the firelight. Jagged peaks tore the horizon apart. Villages sat carved into stone, ancient and unmoved by time. The air carried the scent of dust and diesel, and the sky seemed to stretch forever. It was here, in this unforgiving terrain, that the U.S. Army began its longest war. Helicopters cut through the valleys like mechanical thunder. Convoys crawled along mountain roads barely wide enough for one vehicle. Every shadow, every bend in the trail, a potential ambush. Soldiers learned to read the earth like a language. Tire tracks, footprints, broken stones, small signs that could mean life or death. In the beginning, it felt clear. They were hunting an enemy who had attacked their homeland, but wars have a way of changing shape. The faces blurred, the missions multiplied. What began as a pursuit of justice turned into years of counterinsurgency, rebuilding, and holding ground that shifted like sand. Days bled into nights, patrol after patrol. Some missions ended without contact, others ended in fire and screams. A roadside bomb could erase a life in a blink. Dust and shrapnel filled the air, radios erupted with chaos. In those moments, training met instinct. Soldiers dragged wounded comrades through the dirt, tourniquets twisting, adrenaline flooding veins. The medic's hands shook, not from fear, but from urgency. Every soldier remembers the smell of burning fuel, the taste of sand, the sound of a distant explosion echoing through the valley. They remember the weight of a rifle pressed against the chest during endless hours of guard duty, eyes scanning the darkness, mind replaying home. Letters and photos tucked into armored vests, names carved on helmets, promises whispered into the static of radio chatter. And yet, amid the horror, there was brotherhood, a kind of bond only war can forge. Soldiers learned to trust each other with their lives. In the dust of Afghanistan, friendship was a weapon stronger than fear. When one fell, the others carried him, sometimes physically, sometimes in memory. In the small villages, moments of humanity emerged like fragile light in the rubble. Soldiers played soccer with children, shared water and rations, watched as locals rebuilt schools and wells. These fleeting moments reminded them why they were there: to protect, to help, to bring hope to a place where war had lasted longer than peace itself. But time has a way of wearing down even the strongest armor. 1 year turned into 5, 5 into 10, 10 into 20. The faces changed, new recruits replacing the ones who never came home. A generation of soldiers grew up under the shadow of Afghanistan. Some were children when the war began, and adults when it finally ended. The mission shifted again and again, from defeating Al-Qaeda to rebuilding a nation, to fighting an insurgency that refused to fade. Each new deployment blurred the purpose a little more. Yet, for the men and women on the ground, the mission never truly changed. Protect your unit, survive the day, bring everyone home. In the villages, the people had their own scars. Families torn apart, generations who had never known peace. Trust was fragile. The enemy often hid in plain sight. A farmer by day, a fighter by night. The line between friend and foe dissolved into the dust. Soldiers learned that in Afghanistan, nothing was simple. Winter would come, blanketing the mountains in snow, silencing the gunfire for a while. But even then, the war never slept. Night raids continued, intelligence briefings unfolded under the red glow of tent lights, and somewhere out there, another young soldier prepared for another patrol. For 20 years, Afghanistan became a cycle of courage, confusion, and sacrifice. More than 2,400 American service members gave their lives. Thousands more carried invisible wounds home. The kind you can't see on the body, only in the eyes. For every mission completed, there were moments that would never leave them. The weight of dog tags pressed into a soldier's palm. The folded flag handed to a grieving mother. The long flight home in silence with empty seats beside them. In those 20 years, generations of soldiers passed through the same outposts, walked the same trails, watched the same mountains burn at sunset. And yet, each of them carried a different war inside, personal, private, and unspoken. Then came August 2021, the final withdrawal. After 2 decades, the longest war in American history came to an end. Bases were dismantled. Helicopters lifted off for the last time. And for many, the question echoed louder than the rotors. Was it worth it? Some called it the end of an era. Others called it the closing of an unfinished chapter. For the soldiers who served, it wasn't about politics or headlines. It was about each other, about doing their duty, one mission at a time, even when the reason grew distant. They had fought through blistering heat, snowstorms, ambushes, and loss. They had stood in villages where no one spoke their language, but everyone understood the cost of war. And when they came home, the silence was deafening. The world moved on, but part of them was still there, in those mountains, under that Afghan sky. For some, the battle never ended. The memories returned in dreams. The sound of explosions, the smell of gunpowder, the faces of brothers and sisters frozen in time. But even through the pain, there was pride. Pride in service, pride in sacrifice, pride in standing when the world needed them to. Because war is not just about fighting the enemy, it's about carrying the burden of a nation's grief. It's about doing what few are willing to do, to walk into danger so others don't have to. The US Army in Afghanistan wasn't just a war. It was a generation's story, written in dust, blood, and honor. It was 20 years of courage against uncertainty, duty against despair, and humanity against chaos. And though the war ended, its echo still lingers. In the families who lost, in the veterans who remember, and in the lessons history will never let us forget. Somewhere in those mountains, the wind still moves through the ruins of old bases. The walls are empty, the flags long gone. But the spirit remains. The sound of boots on gravel. The whisper of a promise kept. The US Army didn't leave behind victory or defeat. It left behind sacrifice, the kind that defies definition. So when we speak of Afghanistan, we should not speak only of strategy or politics. We should speak of the young soldiers who looked fear in the face and kept moving forward. The ones who stood watch under foreign skies, believing that what they did mattered, because to them it always did. And maybe that's the meaning of it all. That courage isn't proven in winning, but in enduring, in standing your ground when the world seems to crumble, in holding on to hope when everything else falls away. Because even after 20 years, when the dust settled and the last soldier left the Afghan soil, their story didn't end. It lives on, in memory, in silence, in every heartbeat that once echoed beneath that helmet. And somewhere, in the quiet, far beyond the mountains, you can still hear it. The faint, steady rhythm of a soldier's heart.